This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. This time I did press the recording button. Linda and I just had a very nice little conversation without recording it. But hello again. Welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider. My guest today is Linda Burstyn. Linda is a TV writer from Los Angeles, California. And Linda used to be my across the street neighbor. And her daughter Talia used to be Kai's babysitter. And Kai was madly in love with her. And we all miss Linda and Talia and the whole family a lot. Linda, welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I'm very excited to talk to you, and especially because I just heard a very beautiful interview with you. And I'd like to start with your different professions, because like my mom, you had many different and very interesting professions that led you to become a TV writer. Tell me about it.
Okay. Well, I've always believed that you should do the thing you are most passionate about doing. I grew up in Skokie, Illinois, and people there, had a job and they saved all year long and for their 2 weeks vacation and would go on their 2 weeks vacation and then go back to work. And I just never wanted to be that person. I always felt that you should do the thing that you're most excited about so that every day is a vacation. Like, what would you do if you had, if you could do anything? And that's the thing you should do. So I worked in politics and I worked in journalism, and I'd be happy to tell you more about that. But you asked earlier how I came to being a TV writer. The last big thing I did in journalism before I became a TV writer was I spent a year doing an investigation of female genital mutilation in the United States. And that was for the Atlantic Monthly. And I felt very passionately about doing that. I felt a real calling to help, if I can in any way, this horrendous practice, help stop this horrendous practice. So I did do that. But by the time I was done, I found it was literally hard for me to laugh. I had spent so much time talking to women about having their genitals mutilated. It's not really a pleasant conversation, although I've brought it up at many dinner tables, as my kids will tell you, much to their chagrin. But I thought, what? I deserve to laugh. And so I wrote just on a whim, and at the urging of a friend, I wrote a Seinfeld episode, and I laughed the whole time I was writing it. I wrote it very quickly. It poured out of me. It was a very funny idea, and I just laughed the whole time I was writing it. And I was like, you know what? That's it. I'm doing this. I don't care what it takes.
Linda, I have to ask you a few things. First, what happened with genital mutilation in the United States? Everybody's, I think, shocked when we hear that it exists in this country as well. And I guess this was many years ago that you wrote about it. Do you know what the status is right now?
Well, I wrote about it, I think it was 1996 that article came out. Maybe it was 1995. And what was happening was people from countries where female genital mutilation is widely practiced were coming to the United States, and they were not being given consultation to not do it. So, for example, when people come from countries where polygamy is practiced, they are told, that is not what you do here in the United States. There are various practices that they are told. But as is so often the case, when it comes to practices that demean or hurt women, it is seen as being a cultural practice. And so we can't get involved in a cultural practice. In fact, literally hundreds of millions of women in the world today have had this happen to them. And so countries like Somalia and Ethiopia, where 99% of the women have this happen to them, they come to the United States, and of course they're going to practice it here. And if they don't practice it literally here, which some of them do, they take their daughters back to Somalia for a summer vacation and do it there and then bring them back. They're never taught not to, or really, it's not taught not to, educated about the realities of their bodies and what female genital mutilation does to the female body. So what's happening now? Some things have happened since I started writing about it. I was a writer-producer for Nightline for 3 years, and my goal there was to get Ted Koppel and Nightline to do a story on female genital mutilation. It really had not been dealt with in the major press at all, really only in feminist periodicals. And in fact, I did get a Nightline episode. And since then, many, many articles have been written about female genital mutilation. It is much more out in the zeitgeist. So I'm really glad about that. And I know I haven't kept up with it entirely, but I know there is at least conversation and some laws pertaining to the banning the practice of female genital mutilation in some states.
It's always a very, I don't know, sombering, is that a word in English? Reminder. We think we've come a very long way with women's position in this world, but when you scratch a little bit beneath the surface, there's still so much work to do. Anyway, let's go back to you being a writer, political writer for the Clinton administration. Do you think, I'm always curious because we just talked about how one thing leads to the other. And my mom always said nothing is ever wasted. You never know what something is going to be useful in your life, which experience is going to turn out. Do you think that was that was useful for what you're doing right now? I'm very curious if you can connect that, or is it completely disconnected?
Well, one of the things I said to you when we first got on the phone before we were recording was, I have a lot of these little philosophies. And one of my most important ones is things lead to things and nothing leads to nothing. And everything leads to things. And you say your mother used to say that to you. My grandmother used to say, she didn't speak English very well. She was Hungarian. She used to say, so much you know is good. Whenever you have a chance to learn something, you should learn it. She was in a concentration camp, and there were women who knew how to sew, who were taken out of the line that went to the gas chamber because they knew how to sew. So when she said, so much you know is good, that's what she was thinking about. And frankly, that's what I think about. You never know when something you know might help you or even save someone's life. You just don't know. So I'm endlessly curious and always want to do different things and learn different things. But your question was specifically, the Clinton administration. So I was a political writer for a long time, a writer and a strategist. And it was absolutely the right thing for me to do because it was very much what I wanted to do. And it was really fun. One of my most fun jobs was being the Deputy Communications Director for President Clinton's inaugural in 1993. And I had a team of writers working for me. It was just enormously fun. And if I hadn't done that, I would have never pursued TV writing. A friend of mine a guy who worked for me at that time and who's still a friend of mine, said to me many years later when I was deciding what to do after I left Nightline, he said, you always say that job and the inaugural was your most fun job. The only other place I know where you can be a writer with a team is working for a TV show. Maybe you want to try that. And that's why I sat down and wrote that Seinfeld episode. So you never know, you need to feed the muscle that propels you toward the things you love.
Mm. Thank you for that reminder. Linda, before we jump into talking about Mama Vera and her lessons in her life, I'm curious about two things. One is you are a mom of a daughter in Hollywood. And we used to be parents of a son in Hollywood. And Nick and I often talked about how lucky we are we don't have to raise a daughter in Hollywood. What is it like? How are you dealing with it?
Well, since my daughter may hear this, I am very conscious of trying to keep her grounded and not care too much about superficial things. What I did when she was young that I thought was really useful was I got her, she always loved horses and animals, but I got her into horseback riding. And I thought, she'll be around these horsey women. Horse women are the best women.
Yeah.
They're so grounded, and they don't care about how they look. They care about what their bodies are able to do and how they're able to manage their horses.
And they clean, don't they? I remember my friends in Vienna, they would spend most of the time like taking care of these horses, like cleaning them, and it's a dirty work. It really keeps you grounded.
Yes, but when you're doing it, you don't think of it as dirty work at all. But yes, you're literally cleaning the horse shit out of the hooves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But you love it because it's part of, it's taking care of your animal, and the horse is such a majestic animal. So she got really into that. She did that at least once a week for years and went to horseback riding camp for years. Despite that, as I was telling you earlier, what she really is passionate about is fashion and makeup and things like that. Look, I cannot judge. As I said, you have to find the things you're passionate about. And if that's her calling and what she's interested in, that's great. She is she's a very thoughtful person. She has a really good head on her shoulders. She's smart. She's, I definitely have a feminist household. She's definitely very aware of feminist issues. So hopefully as she gets older, if she goes into fashion, she'll bring that mentality into her work.
Mm-hmm. And apropos feminist household, I have listeners in 70 countries around the world, very, very mixed group of people or women from everywhere around the world. Let's tell them a little bit about the States and what challenges women in the United States are facing. I was very surprised, when I was still in Vienna and writing all of my feminist articles and reading books and being very involved in that thought and movement. We were always fed the idea that women in the United States have come much, much further. Women in the United States were always shown to us as an example of how well it works in this country. And then I moved here, and after a few years living here, I was surprised to learn that's not true. It's just different. The topics are different, Can you share a little bit what challenges women are facing still nowadays in the States?
Well, I do think things have gotten better and better. The place where it's not better, my daughter and I recently had this debate about the Kardashians. I think, you can look at it's nothing against any individual Kardashian. However, this whole promotion of the feminine body as being utterly a sex object and something to be viewed and contorted into some kind of sexual ideal, I have a lot of issues with. And I think it has been very popularized, much to the detriment of women. It's also using a lot of makeup, taking a lot of selfies, this whole notion of being obsessed with how you look and being judged based on how you look. Even this recent controversy about Khloe Kardashian having an unretouched photo, I don't know if you know about it, unretouched photo on Twitter or something. And she said, she wants to control how she looks out in public. Well, why do we have to care so much about how we look that we have to retouch our photos so that our waists look even smaller and so our breasts look even bigger, so our noses look even smaller? It's, it's not good for women. Look, it's not good for men either, but it tends to be an affliction primarily suffered by women. So I would say that is something that's definitely a big thing in the United States. In terms of the workplace, it's gotten better. I think the Me Too movement has, definitely there are issues and problems with it, but generally it has enforced a consciousness of men and women about how they are treated and how they treat women in the workplace. So that's all been good. The TV business is an animal unlike any other, and I can talk about women in TV all day long.
Yeah. But let's talk about Mama Vera all day long. Will you tell me a little bit about her life?
Well, my mother was very young when she got married, but here's how she came to that point in life. She's a Holocaust survivor. She is from Hungary. She was, I think, 2 years old when her father was taken away and used basically as a human mind sweep and was killed. He was probably, I think, 30 years old at the time. By the time she was 4 years old, her mother was taken to a concentration camp, and her mother gave very young Vera to a neighbor, a Christian family, who held on to her for a little while, but apparently Vera was crying a lot, as you would imagine. She missed her mom, and they got scared that they would be caught with a Jewish child, and so they gave her to a Red Cross camp. The Red Cross camp got taken over by Nazis, and all the kids were killed. However, right before they marched the kids out, my mother's aunt, who was in hiding in Budapest, kind of in a tenement, heard about the Nazis taking over this orphanage, this Red Cross orphanage, and her daughter was there. So she went and got her daughter out and saw my mother was there and rescued both of them. And they both stayed in this, in hiding in this kind of tenement in Budapest. And, they hardly had any food to eat and everything, but at least they were together. And eventually Hungary was liberated, and my grandmother eventually made her way back. And they stayed in Hungary and escaped in 1956 during the Hungarian Revolution. My mom was a senior in high school at the time, and she was the number one student in her class. She was really smart and wanted to pursue an advanced degree of some kind. She had thought about being a doctor or something, but they escaped in the back of a wagon from Soviet-controlled Hungary and came to the United States.
Linda, I'm sorry to interrupt. For those who don't know, can you explain the Hungarian Revolution? What was that about?
I will try. My mother would be much better. But basically, the Soviet Union took over Hungary, and the Hungarians rebelled against them, and the Soviets came down very hard and put down those who fought back. When my mom went to school, there were, big pictures of Stalin in her classrooms. Yeah. Yeah. And when she escaped, there were Russian tanks outside her apartment. Yep. So many people were killed in the uprising to try to free themselves of the Soviets. And this is when my grandparents, because my grandmother remarried, when my grandparents said they've been through the Holocaust, they're not going to stick around for this one, and they escaped and came to the United States. So my mom was 17, almost 18, and she came to the United States very soon after. She had to go work in a factory. They had no money. They literally had only the clothes on their back. And my mom took a few textbooks with her. She now laughs about that she took these Hungarian textbooks thinking somehow she'd go back to school.
Yeah. What happened then? You wanted to tell us how she got married very early.
Oh, yes. So she went to work in a factory, and again, it makes me very sad to think here's this young woman with all this promise, and she's now working in a factory in an airplane glue factory in Chicago. And she was introduced to a young man who was going to teach her English. And I use my fingers. I don't know if he was going to teach her English. My father is from Poland, and he had been in the United States already for 6 years when he met my mom, and he knew English. The one language he did not speak. He spoke 6 languages because he was a Holocaust survivor too and lived in various countries. He spoke 6 languages, but none of them were Hungarian.
Yeah.
And my mom spoke Hungarian.
Yes.
So they met and they got married about 3 months later without speaking a common language.
Oh, wow. That's what you can do when you're 19. You wouldn't do that at 40.
Hopefully you wouldn't do that at 19 too. Look, they were somewhat religious, Jewish religious. And I think people in that at that time, it's the late 50s, there were probably all these hormones. And if you get married.
Yes.
You get married. So that's what they did. And they're still married.
Oh, wow. I just wanted to ask, how did it turn out?
There were definitely a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it was the best match for either of them, but they certainly grew up together. And they certainly are 100% there for each other now in their old age. But it does teach me, it really taught me to be very careful about who you pick to spend your life with. As you know, it has a tremendous influence on your life.
And your children's life.
And and who your children are and your children's life and everything. It's an enormous decision. I always say, marry someone you wouldn't mind divorcing. Because I think you should marry someone who fights fairly. And I also think you shouldn't be married to someone you'd be afraid to leave. You should be there because you want to be there, not because you're afraid to leave them. So that's another one of my little philosophies you can take with you.
I can't wait for the book, Linda. You have to write this book. And I want it to be called, You Know So Much. What did Grandma used to say?
So much you know.
So much you know. You have a title for your book.
There you go.
So what happened then with Mama Vera? Did she had, how many kids did she have? Did she continue working?
She continued working always, but my dad had businesses, and she always worked in the businesses. She tried to go to college at night, and she did take classes sometimes at night. And she had 4 kids. She had her first child at 20, and she had me at I think she was 22, and she kept having kids and working and saving money and really trying to keep the family together. My dad was not around a lot. He was he was working quite a bit too. The work ethic in my household was extremely strong. My dad worked 7 days a week, and my mom did too. My mom was constantly working. But also home and baking. You know, I have many fond memories of baking and making dinner with my mom and sewing. She and my grandmother taught me how to cook and sew and iron by the time I was 13. And my grandmother, her mom, my mom's mom, proclaimed that I was ready to get married because I knew all those things. Whereupon I thought to myself that these things will be the last thing I do when I'm married. And in fact, it's true.
How do you feel about them now? Because this always comes up in my interviews. I'm curious, do you feel like that was useful to you or not at the end of the day?
Learning how to cook and clean and iron. And sure, everything you know is useful, like we've always said on this interview. But I am very clear that there's only so many hours in the day. And I do not want to spend them cooking and cleaning. When I am on my deathbed, I want to feel like I left behind a body of work. And if you really want to leave behind a body of work, and if you also have kids and a household, you are not going to be spending a lot of your time cooking and cleaning. I believe in paying people to support you, very much so.
But Linda, you know why I'm asking this? Because in many, many interviews, women told me my mom didn't teach me to take care of the household. And I wish she did. Even if I didn't do it, it would be easier for me to know how to get help or how to get organized or how to organize somebody else to do it for me. That was interesting that women complain about that when their mothers didn't teach them that, even if they don't want to do it. It's very, very interesting. You would be surprised how often that came as a topic of something I wish my mom taught me.
Well, it sounds like, look, we didn't have a lot of money. When you don't have a lot of money, it's not like you think about, should I teach my daughter this? Shouldn't I teach my daughter? You know, I had to, my mom would be at work. I'd have to make the dinner. I'd have to set the table. I'd have to, I was responsible for doing a lot of things. So what it did give me, what all those experiences did give me is a sense of agency.
Yes.
Some would say bossy.
Yes. Yeah.
But that would be a derogatory way of saying it. I definitely have a sense of I can do anything.
Yeah.
So that's good. And I try very hard to give that to my kids. When they ask me for something, I always say, you do it. You look for it. You make it. Before I jump in. The act of figuring things out and of needing to do things really creates a certain brain. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Wow, we have so much to talk. Let's jump more into lessons. Share with me, what do you feel were a few of the most important things you've learned from her?
From my mother?
Yes.
Okay, so hard work, definitely. She's intensely loyal, more so than I am. So I guess I learned it, but on the other hand, I reject some of it. I really think, cut your losses. I'm much more strategic that way. Even though she probably wouldn't call herself maybe now she'd call herself a feminist, but when I was growing up, she probably wouldn't. She was a feminist in that she was really smart. She was in charge of, what she was in charge of in my dad's business was the accounting, taking care of the books, doing the billing, the business side of the business. And she was always a very sharp and on the ball and running everything. It was definitely an impressive person So she taught me that. What else did she teach me? She was a very selfless mother. Again, too much so in my view as a mother now, but it did teach me how to be very giving with my kids. And she was certainly very loving with me. One of the biggest things she taught me was a love of reading. She is still a really big reader and was always a really big reader. And we were voracious readers together. That had a huge influence on me.
Of course, you became a writer. I think you need to read to become a writer.
That's true.
Do you have anything else? Before I ask you the tricky question, what do you wish she taught you? Is there anything you wish she did teach you?
That's a good question. Sorry, let me think about this for a minute.
Please do.
I mean, I know one of the things I wish she taught me was how to be more selfish. You know, again, she was such a selfless mother and wife, and there was a value on that. And, you know, I don't think that's right. I think women need to really have goals of their own and fight for them. Really fight for them. Even if you're in a egalitarian household, in the world, if you want to go for something that is hard to get, which many valuable things are, you really have to fight for them. So I would say that is a big thing. You know, there was a way that she was not interested in rocking the boat.
I wrote down, sorry to interrupt you, but from your other
That's
interview,
okay.
I wrote down, I never had dreams. I wrote down when you asked her, or you were talking about your work, and I think you asked her, what did you want to become or something? And she said, I never had dreams. I think that beautifully connects to that, what you're just saying. That we should be selfish in the sense that we should have our dreams and we should pursue them. And not just give everything to the men and the family and
Yeah, and look, first of all, my heart goes out to my mom. You know, having the childhood she had, the fact that she couldn't do this is not her fault. It is you know, and she has you. If you were talking to her today, she would tell you that she is so proud of what she has done. She has raised 4 children.
In a foreign country.
In a foreign country. She learned their ways. She made a good living. She sent us to college. She has a lot of grandchildren. 10? 12? I can't remember now. She has a bunch of grandchildren. To her, it's very important that we be Jewish and care about Judaism. I'm the black sheep in the family, but my other 3 brothers are very observant, and their kids are observant. So, you know, she's had some success in that. And she speaks once a week or so. She speaks at the Holocaust Museum, and she speaks to other groups about the Holocaust, and she always ties it to today. Because I will say this is one of the beautiful things I learned about my mom, and maybe you can make sure you get this in there, is, you know, she just sent me yesterday something she had written, which is about the immigrants who are at the border in the United States, the border of Texas, and how there's all this hyperbole, especially on Fox News, about they're coming to rape you and steal from you and all this stuff. And she wrote about how these people walk for miles with children in their arms and hungry and scared, and the desperation that leads them to risk so much to come to this country, and how everybody in this country comes from somewhere else, unless you're a Native American. And it is foolish and heartless to think of immigrants to this country as anything but brave. Because that's really what she always says. It's very hard, and you would know this. It's very hard to be an immigrant. It's very hard, and especially people who come to this shores desperate.
But also, they all come to this country with a dream, and my view is that they're all very hard workers. They really want to achieve a better life, and these are the people you want to have around you, people who want to work hard for a better life,
Absolutely.
think that's important.
I met someone, I had someone come to the house a few days ago who was, he washes our rugs and sofas a couple times a year in our windows. And he brought with him a young woman who was 20 years old, who just came here from Guatemala. And she was studying to be a nurse in Guatemala. And, I look at someone like that, and I tried to help her. And I gave her phone numbers and whatever, and I said, please stay in touch. And when I see a young woman like that, I think that's my mother. And I feel like if there's something that my mom taught me, and she didn't sit down and teach it to me, but showed me with her life, it's there but for the grace of God go I. There is no separation between me and that woman. That is me. I am her, and she can be me. I hope to help her so that she can achieve, right now she's working, cleaning houses and whatever. But I would love for her to be able to do whatever she wants with her life. That's my mother's legacy.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing it.
I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I want to do two things. I want to recap your mom's lessons, and then I want to read out loud the lessons that I wrote down from your other interview from you, because I want to share your lessons as well. They matter to me. And I'm very excited about your book of lessons. I want to motivate you to do this. So help me recap. From Mama Vera, we learned to be careful about whom you marry. I also wrote down marry someone you don't mind divorcing. I think that came from you, didn't it? Hard work, intense loyalty. Feminism in the sense that no matter her circumstance, she was running things that mattered. And she had her important position in the whole situation. To be a selfless mother, I also put down too much so. So as a lesson you wish she did teach you was to be a little bit more selfish. And this is a lesson I think we all need to learn and teach our daughters. Reading and love of books, giving. And finally, we just talked about this no separation between us. I think it's so important, and I've learned that through this podcast. I'm learning that's a big lesson for me, that we are all one. No matter where we are and what our circumstances are and how our moms grew up, the lessons are always the same, and that made me understand that we are really all interconnected. There's no separation, as you said, between you and me. Did I miss anything from Mama Vera?
I don't think so.
And then your important lessons I wrote down were, you don't know the outcome of anything, but you know who you want to be in the world. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. And we also talked about things lead to things and nothing leads to nothing. And also don't be afraid to push harder and to be strategic. I think that matters for us creative people who just want to sit down and create and are not so good with pushing and being strategic. I think that's it. Linda, thank you so much for all this wisdom and this amazing story. And wow, we learned a lot from you.
It was such a pleasure. I love talking to you, and we should talk more.
We should. We definitely should. If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyouMama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.